to bring this to what you're doing, so you're working with lots of agencies. You've been doing
Hmm.
this for a number of years, and we've had different agency coaches on, but we haven't delved too much into this wider world of ours. We've been very North America centric. So maybe we can start. I'd just love to hear, how things are going for agencies in Ireland these days. What the scene is like.
Yeah.
That's not too vague of a
So
question.
interesting enough, I don't actually work with a lot of Irish agencies. In
Hmm.
fact, I'm European, as in it's handy to live in Ireland. We're the only English speaking country in the European Union, seeing as England's about to jump out. And so I kind of work internationally, and basically what I'm seeing currently at the moment, it's the 1st of June, like 2020.
It's weird.
We've gone through, I know what's happened, like it's so weird.
Yeah.
We've gone through obviously this massive disruption in the world, but pretty much all the agencies I talk to have found new opportunities, have pivoted really well, have worked from home really well. You know what agency owners are like. They're tenacious, hardworking bunch. Some of them are like, do or die kind of attitude. So overall here in Europe, basically because there's been a lot of government assistance, it's been clear about the messages, and I just love agency owners because they're just damn hard working. So they've just rolled their sleeves up and figured out new ways to work remote, work with their clients, do business, work with new clients, offer new services. I feel, apart from the health side of things, and obviously the challenges that are going on in the world, quite optimistic for the agency community.
Yeah, yeah, and here in the States, I guess there's a lot of different work-life models for agencies. I think that it's probably easier to bring agency work remote than a lot of other areas of business.
Yeah.
And my experience is from the New York agency world, which is just very buzzsaw 24/7 sort of environment. I'd love to
Mm.
hear your perspective a little bit on the European work life models, and specifically, where you've worked, how people have been working and are changing things up now, and
Yeah.
so on.
So
Yeah.
there's a kind of a couple of factors. I used to work at HubSpot. They've a large office here in Dublin. I'm now in the west of Ireland, so pretty much in the countryside. And a company like HubSpot and a lot of the tech companies are based in Dublin. So you've got Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, HubSpot, all the EMEA headquarters are based in Dublin. And a lot of those tech companies did support working remote. So you could be in the office maybe 3 days a week, work from home 2 days a week. And what that meant was any agencies that are associated with those tech companies, they've very much got used to supporting their staff. So I feel that the work from home, and maybe you can sort of check this on the American side of things, Dan, is it's actually a mindset. If you had this old school attitude of you've got to be in the office to do your work, like that just didn't cut it. It was more difficult for those companies to transition to working from home and being results orientated. So I think what I've seen is the tech scene in Ireland, Europe, has been very supportive of people working from home. Therefore, the agencies in that ecosystem had got used to learning about their, sales representative, their channel consultants, their marketing contacts were working from home. So I feel like agencies sort of by osmosis picked up that perhaps their staff could work 1 day a week. So when this change in our lockdowns came in over here, within a couple of days, agencies were at home. They were using Slack and Zoom. They were ironing out some communication bugs, and it was business as usual for them. So HubSpot the same, Google, everyone, it was the same because their mindset was very much, we can do this. What has been the struggle is their clients who staff didn't have laptops, had no clear KPIs on how to work, had kids at home, so that was even more difficult for them. So the agency's clients, some of them struggled, and some of them just had to go pause. What's happened now is, though, everyone's sort of going, oh, we're going back to work, but we know that we're not going back the same way. We have to figure out desking, safety. Some children aren't at school yet, so it's not actually physically possible for the worker to go back to the office. So what's happening here is just a lot of flexibility. A lot of companies have said, we're not opening up for the rest of the year. You can work from home for the rest of the year. So what do those people in their fancy offices, what do the companies do with those beautiful offices in the center of town with a massive rent do? It's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about with the way cities are probably going to change and so on. But one thing you mentioned is the sort of this new premium getting put on results and results oriented workers and that sort of thing, which can mean a lot of different things. So I guess my question is what has been surprising your clients? What's been surprising the owners about who's producing results and who's not in the context of a remote situation?
Yeah. Well, we're a few minutes into this interview, so I'm definitely able to bring up one of my favorite topics to help agencies actually quantify that, whether the person is in the office or out. I'm always banging on about my favorite book and business methodology is Traction by Gino Wickman, and that's the entrepreneurial operating system. It is the actual foundation stone for all the successful agencies that I've worked with, plus that I haven't worked with. Anyone I've studied and modeled, they have used this system. And how that works is that you actually set an accountability chart for your business. What you do is you sit down and you look at all the tasks that need to be done and you group them into roles. And with those roles come responsibilities. So let's, for example, take inbound account manager, for example. We know that that person has to be responsible for the results of the client. They have to have a utilization rate, so they have to be billable at, say on average above 70% of their working week has to be billable work, and that's a number that you would give them. And they have to, learn how to they have to be a really good expert in their field. So you might set a skills score and you can quantify that, like they have to be 80 out of 100 or something over a quarter. So very clearly now we've got an inbound account manager or just a digital marketing account manager with some clear numbers, responsibilities. They do other things, but they go in every day making sure that they are achieving those 3 results with those numbers attached to them.
Sure.
That are reviewed on a weekly basis. Whether they're doing that at 6 in the morning until 10, being available on Slack for communication, nobody really cares. It's about results orientation. So highly recommend any agency owner that's here still trying to figure out, are my team productive? Start at the very beginning by reading Traction. Look at an accountability chart and figure out what are the key metrics that you want people to do. Because working from home does not mean logging on at 9 and logging off at 5. Not when you've got kids running around. So you might need to just get very, very clear about, I need that person to do these things by a certain time in the day, to be available in a certain form of communication, available for quick messages on Slack, but they might need to get up at 6 and have all their work done by 10 because they've got to deal with the kids for a couple of hours, and then they've got to come back for a couple of hours, then they've got to go away again. So I think our whole day is going to completely change, and getting all antsy and sort of, hung up on, you haven't been online all day. It's just not going to cut it. Have they achieved the things that you needed them to do for the people that depend on them? Are they hitting their numbers every week? That's really where you want to be.
Yeah. And you touched on something interesting there. And I think, EOS is something a lot of our audience might be familiar with. And if you're not, I would recommend checking it out. It's definitely a pretty tried and true framework. But I just feel like there's so many more intangibles now, like, is there benefit from your employees doing nothing that is measurable, measurably beneficial, but is creative and leaves open space to come up with new ideas? Like, how do you do that sort of thing remotely if everything has to be measured and you're only heading towards these very specific, rigid, measurable things? Can you still get the magic that you normally get? That's the sort of thing that I think there isn't like a clear roadmap on yet. And
Yeah.
And another thing is like the tools. Like I've always been very skeptical of things like Slack and these sort of the instant chat sort of things, because it almost feels like a tail wagging dog situation where it seemed like everybody just jumped on them overnight, without thinking about what they should be used for, where they're beneficial, what's useful and what's not. And I hold out, some measure of acceptance that I could be wrong. Maybe they could be really useful for certain things, and maybe they are. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, where do you think it's useful to have just unrestrained, open digital communication versus like leaving people the hell alone to do their work?
Yeah. So yeah, let me tackle those kind of two things. And even though they overlap, let me talk about, first of all, if we're asking for 70% utilization from an employee in the business, that leaves 30% open for training, meetings, admin, breaks, time off, other things as well. An agency only exists if you are doing work that clients are getting results from in a way that's profitable for your business. There is no other thing. You are not another thing. You have to produce results for clients in a profitable way. So having this, focus on billable, I think it's just super important that people understand that the only way the business is going to function is if those metrics are met. Now, with that 30% that's there, in some of the agencies I work with, they factor in a good 4 hours is training time or thinking time or upskilling. So you factor that in, you give them that time, but they must understand that there's 70%. The business is relying on that the work is good, it's done efficiently, and the client is getting a result from it. They're happy. That's an agency, that's a professional services business. But definitely, I agree, there has to be thinking time and factoring in for that. But it has to be after the profitable work. The overlap with that as well is, I agree, everyone did jump on Slack, but how in goodness name are we even going to be in contact with each other, especially in a remote office, if we don't have some form of, whether that's Google Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever it is. The way Slack would work is that you agree as a company what are the times that you're going to be online. So it could be an 8:30 kickoff meeting in the morning, that everyone's available for the first hour of the day. And then they can switch it off and go, I have to block my time. I've got 2 hours of focused work to do. So they disconnect from that. You also set up channels of communication so that if you are messaging someone about a certain client, the client channel, so that when the person comes back in, they can see everything that's happening with that client. They're up to date. It's like a little war room for the client. So they can come back in after they've done their focused work and go, okay, I can see where I'm at with that client, as opposed to individual messages. So I think the use of channels, the use of snooze notifications, the use of designated times, that it's understood that people are off Slack from 10 to 12. If it's an urgent thing, a text message. But you schedule it. You're trying to make it like this big communication hub, but everyone agrees on the terms for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're reselling me on Slack. Maybe we'll give it another shot.
Let's do a workshop on it.
Maybe so. We've always been a very kind of like, yeah. We've always been a very deep work centric company, but maybe there's a place for it for sure.
And I'm 100% behind. I love Cal Newport's. I've listened to the book a couple of times. I'm a big fan of it. A big fan of blocking things off.
Yeah.
So it can be combined. I totally agree. This constant pinging, and I'm on about like 8 different workspaces right now. If I didn't switch off and monitor that, I would never get anything done.
Right. That makes sense. One thing I definitely want to get to is, we spoke earlier, and you were involved in a major international merger between compiling into one agency.
Yes, that's right. Avidly.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk about, what did you learn from that? What was it like combining lots of different cultures into one?
Yeah, that was that was like 5 different countries, different languages, different nationalities, different personalities, different styles. The one thing was that they were all part of the HubSpot ecosystem. And if anyone knows working with HubSpot, and this can apply to, they might have all been Salesforce resellers, they might have all been Drift resellers. I think if you've got a common ethos and anybody in the HubSpot community knows there's a certain type of personality. They drink the Kool-Aid. They're all part of inbound, rah, rah, rah. Those people sort of resonate together. And it was interesting. The initial conversation started by two agency owners at a HubSpot a partner event who clicked and talked about sharing leads across the borders, Sweden and I think it's Sweden and Denmark. It just started there, right? And they had a sort of an affinity of working with each other. They liked each other. And this is really important as we go into a new phase of working. You might be sitting as an agency owner thinking about partnering with someone, thinking about merging, thinking about buying. And what I learned through that is, again, it's back to EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. You must have your values clear, crystal clear about who you are, your own personal values, and then the values of the agency. And what I've seen over and over again is if your values are clear and you get on with somebody, it's probably because you share a lot of common values. When you combine that with the values of the agency and the values of their agency, that's a really good starting point. If you've ever had that feeling where, a friend introduces you to a really good friend of theirs, but you just don't gel. You ever had that feeling? And they're like, I don't understand. Like, I get on with you, we get on. Why don't you get on with that person? It's probably because you might have, like, let's say 3 out of the 5 your values with that person. Okay. But then there's maybe only one value in connection when you add it all up together. And so that feeling of, I don't really, not really getting it, like a connection there with this person in a friendship or in a business or thing, it's values. Values are off. And I've seen mergers go ahead with other agencies where they acquired an agency. And it was only 6 months after they realized that they didn't check the values, and the values were completely off.
Yeah, there's so much to dig into there. I guess the first question is, what sort of situation do you think it makes sense for an agency to do a true merger? Or better yet, is there a way that if you're an agency and you think that a merger might work, you already have an idea for how it could work with another agency, what's a good way to test the waters? How did that in your situation with that particular firm, what did they do to kind of ease into it?
Yeah, so first of all, you've got to understand, what do you want from the merger, like what do you want in your business? And I see this over and again. A lot of agencies haven't got a clear plan. Not a sailor, but I use a lot of sailing analogy about what island are you going to, on what type of boat, and with what type of crew do you need? Because if you need a rowing boat, you're in a lake and you only need a couple of people, you're going to have a cruisy little trip, right? But if you need a catamaran because you're doing international competitions and you're going from, San Francisco out to Hawaii in a race on a catamaran, that's a different crew. So you have to be very clear about what you actually want in your business, and how would that agency take you there? Are they going to bring in a certain type of crew that's going to get you there? Because you have to crystallize that for your own self, because everyone in the agency is going to need to have a space, and there's no point in 2 agency owners coming together and they both want the same thing, because everyone's got to have the right seat. You have to go, okay, I'm going to be really good at this part of the boat, and then the other agency owner is going to be very good somewhere else. You can't have 2 captains. It just doesn't work. So first of all, what do you want? Where are you going? When are you getting there? What does it look like? And it is okay right now to make a decision about, you like this business, but it's not what you love. So you might be easing someone in to have a part-time share in it in the future. So just all the options, put them on the table. And then the next thing is to have a conversation. Just reach out and see where the other person is at. And have they got a clear values? Have they got their clear map and their destination going? Once that's agreed, if it's like, yeah, this could be something, work on one project together.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess one thing is just the specter of uncertainty, right? Where, you might be thinking that this is a good direction for your agency to go in, so you're going to go merge with some other agency because they have the skill set that you don't have, that you feel like you need. but then the market changes drastically.
Right? Yeah.
There's more of this. So I guess what I'm getting at is there a way to test people that some of our listeners might not be thinking of? Are there ways that you've seen this work out well to trial a particular service or develop strategic partnerships or anything like that that jumps out at you?
Yeah, it's definitely working on a project together, like coming up with one particular going, hey, do you want to work on with this client together? Or I'm thinking about approaching this company. I'd really like to work with them. Would you like to come in with me? And it's an informal thing. It doesn't have to be going down through mergers and acquisitions and paperwork. And you just set up a little project and you work with them and you see what's their skill set? How did it work? How is their communication? What's their style? You get to trial with the client. You might even say to the client, hey, we're partnering up together. It's normally, 10,000, but we'll do it for 8 because we're trialing something out. So you work with someone you've got a good relationship with, or a client that's open to that, because you've got to make it win for you. What are you going to learn? Win for that agency and win for the client. If they're going to be a guinea pig, then you need to trial what you think it's going to be doing. And then you need to document everything along the way. Get clear about who's doing what, when, and where. When are the handovers happening? Who's responsible for things? Real clear process documentation.
Right, right. And one thing that you might be on the forefront of in your position, kind of as an international or European focused agency coach, is a lot of what we've encountered sometimes are European agencies that want to sell into the U.S. or vice versa, U.S. agencies that want to sell into Europe.
Yeah.
And we've avoided selling into Europe for our clients because we're like, there's entire cultural sensitivities that we don't know. It's probably better for you to go a different route there. We're mostly U.S. focused as of now, with the exception of some UK campaigns and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Canada, we're good at, but I guess I'd love to learn a little bit about that. Like, do you have any stories of things that surprise you in terms of cultural sensitivities between agencies, between strategic partnerships across the ponds, and so on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm sort of noticing over and over again is with Europeans, they can be quite reserved. They don't say a lot, and that can come across as quite standoffish. But if they might not say a lot in a meeting. So I've had this come up over and over again where you'll have a meeting with someone, there's loads of people in the room, but nobody has any questions or they don't have any input. Specifically with the Nordics, they can be a lot like this. However, if you ask them individually on a tool like Slack, not working for them, I promise, but you will get a lot of feedback. Sometimes people do not like talking in large rooms. Total opposite with America. I've worked with HubSpot, I've worked in an American company. Everyone has an input, an idea. You have freedom of speech. It's your right. That's the way you were brought up. You don't want to leave a meeting without contributing or sharing your idea or moving the meeting forward. So what can happen is you might have a meeting with a European client and you're like, yeah, they didn't say a lot. They might not say a lot if there's more than a few people in the room, but if you reach out to them individually, you'll get their individual attention. And that's just like one cultural thing that I've noticed. And I can hear that from American companies. They're like, yeah, I don't think they weren't very vocal, or they weren't very interactive. No, not in a group. But if you reach out individually, you're going to get the real answer, and you're going to and just book one-on-one time with people. So I think that's the biggest thing, is a lot of what I've noticed over the years of working across the cultures is one-to-one meetings. You might do a group presentation, one-to-one meetings.
Yeah, we're kind of like the needy puppy dogs of the world. It seems like a lot of the time, and that's definitely something I've encountered, and it is weird from America's perspective, and yeah, it seems like that could inform a lot of how you set up a sales process in Europe. As you have a champion, you have one person, and then you let them bring you into the right rooms and so on.
And then you let them ask individual questions afterwards. You open up a channel and you go, hey, you can text me here, you can message me here, I've set up a Slack channel for you. Or you can email me here with any individual questions, and then you can book up a follow-up meeting individually with that person.
Right. That makes sense. One thing that I know you're doing a lot of, as are as we are in a different way, I guess, is setting up podcasts for your clients. We're doing a
Yeah,
podcast right
yeah.
now. You have one, I have one. But being the sales flack that I am, I wanted to feed all the objections up front. So I think a lot of people, to play devil's advocate, are saying this is a new shiny object. It's hugely time consuming. Everyone
Okay.
and their mother has a podcast. Why should I do it too?
I love that. I've got this great meme of Dr. Evil doing the everyone's got a freaking podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does feel like that, but let me give you some numbers on it. There are 1.7 billion websites in the world. Okay. Today, so we're talking beginning of June, there's approximately 1 million podcasts. 1.7 billion websites, 1 million podcasts. Out of those 1 million, there's only about 200,000 of those that are actually active. Mr. Joe Rogan being the top of the pile there, right? So there are only 200,000 podcasts that are very active. You and me are one of those active, i.e. more than 15 episodes. That's what we're at, right? It's a really, really small market. And I don't know about you, but the last time I looked at my website stats, nobody was spending 40 minutes, 45 minutes on my website, going through every page, reading everything. But people are listening to pretty much most of a podcast, as long as it's interesting and good content. So they're spending time with you, listening to, your messaging, your expertise, your personality. They're getting to know you. And generally they're doing that either out on a walk, out in nature, when everyone's back driving in their car, they're on a commute. So they're not even in the office. So you've got a different attention, a different time, a different depth level, and a quantity there, way more than a website. Plus, you do the content right, you've got evergreen content. You and I know that we can take this video, which is also audio, and chop this into 10 different pieces of social media content that we can be using this time next year. So the reasons for me, and I'm just in the middle of launching my third podcast. I've had one before and I reiterated it. It's coming up to 60 episodes this week, and it's been a huge game changer for my business. And now I'm about to launch a local one because I've realized all my international travel is definitely taking a bit of a slowdown. So I'm building a local podcast to connect with the people in my local area.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and we're definitely doubling down on content as
Yeah.
as our listeners probably know by now. So that makes sense. And the other objection is, let's say I'm an introvert and I'm scared to interview people. It just seems like a huge pain. Like, what do I talk about? Like, I've got this agency. We've worked all over the map. Like,
Yeah.
what would be interesting to cover that isn't covered right now? Right.
Yeah, so if you wanted to think of your agency, like I always like to use the village analogy. So if you wanted to think of your agency and there was like 1,000 listeners, what is that 1,000 ideal clients and listeners? And maybe out of them, 100 you might work with over a 5-year period. Let's say, like, just keep it really, really small. I think you've got to go, who are those ideal clients? Who do you love working with? Start with the people you know, right? That you've had the best time. They had a problem. You fixed the problem. How did you fix the problem? So like a case study, but it's an interview. And you can just start from there. You can have a format. You can have a particular style, particular industry. You can have all different ways of doing it. But I think even if you're an introvert, who do you like having individual conversations with that are your clients? And then when you get those on, you can ask them, hey, can you recommend me anyone else? Because those people that you like working with have friends, have colleagues, have industry connections, and just keep it to the people that you enjoy talking to, and you're recording it. You are just going to record it. You can get your team to do the editing, the cutting, in your agency, or you can outsource it for very, very little. But if you really if you are a real introvert, there's going to be someone on your team that isn't. So give it to them and get them to do it, because that's giving them an opportunity to grow and share and connect.
Yeah, and I found that with our team, they've really rallied around doing the podcast work. I mean, it's just been the most fun and the most interesting thing that they're doing a lot of the time. So I definitely agree with that. I think that one objection we've gotten from clients before, or not objection, but just one thing that's come up a few times, is that I think the most interesting podcasts are the ones where stories are told and there's scars that are bared, and it's honestly like talking honestly about the challenges of running a business and making it work. And I think a lot of people feel like if we do that, we're going to look like less of a sure bet to our potential clients and our current clients. So some stuff we're scared to share because maybe there's NDAs or something.
Yeah.
We might lose clients from it. I guess I'd love to hear what you would say to that. How do you make a podcast interesting while dealing with that perceived risk, I guess, or that perceived worry?
Yeah, so you're going to have a format for the show. You're not going to turn up and just let it all roll. So there's things you're going to ask the guest, what would you like to talk about? What's off limits? Let's keep, things. But I mean, people
Well,
people are looking for reality, Dan. Like that's the whole thing, the world that we're living in right now.
Right.
We're living in a curated world. So
that's what I'm saying though, is how do you balance that? So if you're an agency and you've got these big clients, you got a lot to lose potentially. How do you make a podcast that's still interesting and still lets you bear your scars and tell your stories and give listeners the thing that they came there for? How much should you be worried about losing clients and that sort of thing?
Oh, definitely not. And obviously you're not going to interview those clients that are really sensitive and really kind of, oh, I can't talk about that. You're not going to interview the bad clients, right? You're going to interview the good ones. You are going to talk about mistakes and how you overcome them. You're not going to you're not going to make it uncomfortable for them, but you'll have decided what you're going to talk about beforehand. And if you think you can hide things from people, I ask my agency owners, what mistakes did you make? I want to know, because people are going to listen and go, geez, I was just about to make that mistake. Thank goodness now I don't have to, right? So we're not living this curated world, this Instagram world, this this TV, this Kardashian world. That we've just seen the output of that. That's all getting crumbled right now. So a bit of reality, a bit of challenge, sitting there and going, oh, do you remember we made that mistake? Oh, I do remember that mistake. Let's talk about how we came over it. Oh, it was really uncomfortable. That's what people are craving right now. They want to learn from people's mistakes. So I wouldn't hide from it at all. It's a really good strength.
Yeah. I would love to start seeing that more instead of just a case study section on the site. Imagine if there was a mistakes tab at the top.
Yeah.
How interesting that would be.
This went off kilter. This went out of scope. We had an argument and then we fixed it up, and this is how we did it.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting section of a website if an agency had the gall to do that.
Out of scope mistakes. There's an idea for a podcast. You could ring around and why not? Because it's, any good agency knows they've always had a hiccup with a client, and you wouldn't be doing a great job. Nothing goes smoothly in agency world.
Yeah.
And it'd be great for clients to hear, oh, it wasn't my agency. It's actually part of the normal thing when you're trying these new things with new marketing technology and new teams and pandemics. Life's going to go wrong. But what they want to hear is about that agency who chipped in and had a clear communication plan with the person and talk to them, and how they overcame. And they'll go, oh, wow, they're real people. I want to work with them. Yeah, I wouldn't hide anything.
I think that bears repeating and reminding. So that's great. As we're getting towards the end of the time here, sure. One thing that you mentioned before we jumped on that I forgot about is that you are a very successful power lifter. So I'd love to hear about your experience there. And are there any parallels that you've taken to running a business?
Yeah, a lot actually. I'm a late power lifter. So for anyone who's listening, it's deadlift, bench, and squat. I'm bench dominant because I just have a unusual amount of upper body strength for a chick. My squat and my deadlift aren't so great. But I have represented my country I was 43, I think, the first time I did it, which I'm a late developer. So not too late to try new things is definitely the business parallel that I bring in. And also about mindset, about just having a clear plan. I have a program that when I'm competing, I've got to adhere to, and just going through the motions of planning of, okay, what am I going to eat on the day? What am I going to wear on the day? What am I going to, how am I going to lift, like a plan of my numbers, and also a lot of visualization, which is just what I talked about at the beginning. You've got to sit down, especially right now, and go, okay, I had this great idea for an agency. I was in a corporate job and I left the corporate job and I've built this agency and there's 8 people here now. We've just come off the back of a pandemic. The world's changing at a rate of knots. What do I want now? Because the story of leaving the corporate job is not going to get those 8 people riled around you, motivated. You've got to sit now and go, what do you want now? Which island are you going to? Where is it? What type of boat do you need? What type of crew do you need? And you've got to map that out. That whole plan needs to be crystal clear, because you can't do it on your own. And I think that whole analogy of having a plan and a program, all the things that I've done when I've been competing, it's all the stuff I do with agencies, just in a very different way.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think that's really cool. For me, it's been jiu-jitsu and doing those tournaments, and I think for me, it's simple in that it sucks so bad, and it's so nerve-wracking to go up in front of dozens of people and fight somebody, that it makes everything else more bearable. So like whenever I've been nervous before, whatever, a big pitch or a big interview or something, I can just remind myself of having done that, and it becomes just nothing. So I think that's kind of like burning your hand on a hot stove and taking it off again, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity as well for agency owners. I've seen a lot of them have this great big story about, oh, this is why I started the business and I'm never going to work for the man again, and da 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 da. But you can't build culture, a passion, a vision, a mission, a statement around all of that. And if you're not enjoying the journey, I think now more than ever, if you are not rip-roaring excited to get back into your office or get back into new business with your team, if it's not a wholehearted 100% yes, you really have to seriously consider who you're taking with you on this, because you can't kind of half do it on not what we're about to head into for the rest of 2020 and beyond. If your heart isn't in it anymore, that's totally fine. And this from jiu-jitsu, if your heart isn't in it, you're gone. You're just down face plant on the mat. That because you have to go into this with your heart all in it. And it's okay right now to look around and go, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Plenty of other opportunities are going to open up for you. Don't be taking a team of people kind of like wishy-washy with it. And it's the same thing when I'm competing. If I'm kind of like, I don't think I can lift that, I don't lift it. I never lift it. You have to go all in with these things, especially now, and especially taking people and clients with you, taking a team with you, taking clients with you. If you aren't crystal clear and really super passionate about what you're doing, don't be messing around with it,
Right. I think that's a great place to end. So I appreciate it, Clodagh. How can people get in touch with you?
It's growwithgroup.com, or you can go to clodagh@growgroup.com, or you can just head on over to any of the podcast places that you get wherever you listen. I'm on all of them, and it's Agency Life, to hear from other agency owners about the highs and lows and some mistakes